and welcome to a special edition of the Lit Gals. I don't know that we've ever done this before. We're like groundbreaking here for us. We are excited to be here as a part of World Read Aloud Day, which is February 5th. And so we are just excited to be a part of that and share some of our favorites. But before I get ahead of myself, I'm Marty Hoofer, Digital Content Manager for Keep Indiana Learning. And Morgan, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I am Morgan Mason. I am one of the professional learning specialists here at Keep Indiana Learning, and I live mainly in the early literacy world.
Hello, my name is Anna Cook, and I am a literacy specialist all over Indiana and neighboring states.
So Anna, why don't you tell us a little bit about World Read Aloud Day and why are we here?
It is a very, very special day. And not only is it a special day, but I think that it needs to be a special time throughout the year.
Yeah.
And we're really here, the Lit Gals are here to promote World Read Aloud Day. And hopefully that will make it World Read Aloud Week and month and into the years.
Yeah.
I saw something about World Read Aloud Day, and I thought that it was very poignant and important. And so if you don't mind, may I please read? World Read Aloud Day is all about celebrating the power of diverse voices and stories through reading aloud. On this day and every day, we need to emphasize the importance of access to literacy and the impact of reading aloud on communities, both locally and globally.
I love that.
Yeah, I think it just sums it up. So thank you for letting me read this, but I thought we just cannot let this go.
No. So we're going to take a little bit different focus today for our show. We're going to talk about two topics. Why is reading aloud important? And we'll all talk about that from our own kind of specialty area that we're familiar with in literacy classrooms. So why is reading aloud important? And what are our two favorite read alouds? So I'm very excited about that part of the show. But let's first talk about why is reading aloud important? And Morgan, I think when a lot of people think about reading aloud, they think about that 3-year-old on someone's lap listening to a story. So we're gonna let you go first. We'll put you on the hot seat first. Why is reading aloud so important in those early literacy spaces?
Yeah. So I loved kind of grappling with this question because I thought about it both as a mom of little kiddos right now, of a 3-year-old, of a 1.5-year-old that we do read aloud every day. I also thought about it from the lens of a first grade teacher when I was a first grade teacher. So the things that I think are most important when it comes to reading aloud is modeling those skills. And that could be modeling expression. That could be modeling the use of punctuation. That could be modeling feelings. There's so many things that you're modeling within that. It could also be a specific skill, like a certain grammar skill that you're working on, or even a certain comprehension skill that once you model it for your students or for your kiddo, they are going to grasp that so much more than they would if you just told them about it or if you just taught them about it, So I think that modeling piece and that showing them the skills in action through your reading aloud, that's the first thing that I think is so important when it comes to these read alouds. The other thing is encouraging that love for reading. I will never stop preaching that to anyone and everyone, that starting at such a young age, kiddos notice those things. They're going to notice when you're reading aloud to them. They're going to notice when you are reading as the adult in their life. We end every night with a couple of bedtime stories that we're reading aloud. We are showing them the importance of reading and of developing those skills. This was just funny, but as I was thinking about it, I got a Kindle for Christmas, as you two know, and I was reading it the other day, and my son was like, "Why aren't you reading it out loud?" And he was because I told him, I said, "I'm reading," but he was just really confused why, because he's so used to hearing me read aloud to him. He was really confused. He's like, why are you reading aloud? So we talked about reading in your head and all of that. So this was hard to sum up, but if I had to just land on two things that I would say as to why reading aloud is so important, that's where I'd go.
Love it. And so we have not talked about these in advance. So it's going to be very interesting to see if there's overlap between what we say. So, Morgan, I love those. Anna, what are yours?
So I used to be a first grade teacher, a fourth and fifth grade teacher, and then also an administrator for an intermediate, middle school and high school. And I've got to tell you that I have been reading aloud to students, my own child, my grandchildren forever. I definitely agree everything that you had said, Morgan, especially for those young ones. Our children need to hear reading aloud. They need to hear that. What does it sound like, right? And I just posted about the significance of reading aloud, both for young and old alike. And I've got to tell you guys that probably the most rewarding time that I had when I was doing read alouds was, yes, fourth and fifth grade. They loved it. But most importantly, my middle school and high school students, they absolutely loved it. And I wrote a blog about intentional read alouds focused on instruction. And that is actually, the older that they get, talk to them about, we're going to read this book, and I really want you to focus on, and make that focus, something that you've already taught, that you want to revisit, maybe a new concept, a new standard that you're working on as well, but just reading aloud with that focus of instruction. And I don't mean to go back to that pandemic, but that was definitely a time that we were so hoping more read alouds would occur, and they didn't. So our kids are lacking in that, listening to a good read, any type of a read aloud, and also with that focus on instruction. So I just love read alouds. It is truly one of my most favorite days. And I will, on World Read Aloud Day, I will be going to a middle school, friends. And the teacher has invited me and said, please, come into my room and do a read aloud, and it will be a focus on a standard for that grade. So
I love it. Well, the standard is actually where I thought, because I also loved read alouds in my middle school classroom. They happened on the daily. Is no exaggeration in my reading class. It didn't always every day in my writing class, but it did in my reading classes. And so when I think about why they are important, I came to two things, and none of them are just to enjoy literature. That is there. So Morgan, I'm so glad you used it as one of yours, because I didn't use it as one of mine. But for one, I used it as a way to work on listening standards. I found the listening standards really hard to work on. And so this was just an easy way to work them in, really without anyone thinking twice about it, that we were just working on those, just not by osmosis, but it didn't feel like they were learning anything. They were learning lots. But so listening standards is one, and then fluency, because I was able to read books at a higher reading level than some of my kids. And that's good for, much like what you said, Morgan, is just hearing the text is so important. So fluency and listening skills were my two reasons when I got in the teacher hat and not just talked about, hey, let's just love a good book together. Because I think there's something also to be said for a shared text.
For sure.
That, once we've all read XYZ together, we don't have to read it again to talk about it.
Right.
And then it can come back up over and over in different lessons, which I always found an invaluable perk of read alouds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Now what I'm most excited about. What are your two favorite read alouds, Morgan?
This was so hard to narrow it down to just we could have made a very long episode about all of our read alouds, but I chose one, again, kind of taking the lens of both a former teacher and a mom myself now of young kids. So I chose one. This is one that I frequently read in the classroom as a first grade teacher. Let's Go for a Drive, Mo Willems. I mean, all of Mo Willems' books are just wonderful, but I love this specifically for the read aloud purpose because for a couple of different reasons. The dialogue and the back and forth between the elephant and piggy characters is something that was so good for modeling that skill, the showing them what dialogue looks like, showing them using expression when you're reading. Because if you are familiar with these books, you know the elephant and piggy are very bold characters. There's a lot going on in their stories. So that, and I also love too, if you notice, like it's not really word heavy. Like it'll have just a couple of words on each page. And I love that for the read aloud purpose too, because especially for younger kiddos, it's easier for them to digest. I think there's a lot to say about books with lots of words too, but I think depending on the purpose you need it for, I like that this is easier to digest and there are less words that
Well, and I was thinking about reading for expression, like that page that you had said, wait.
Oh yeah.
I mean, these are good teachable moments.
Oh, yeah. And even, you can even talk about how, I'm trying to show you, how wait is in all caps.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that conversation with students of not only is there an exclamation point, but it's in all capital letters. So we need to be really loud when we read that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can model that, you can talk about it. There's just so many things that you can do with that read aloud in a lot of teachable moments. So that a lot of Mo Willems books are like that, but I chose this one for today. The other one, this came straight from the nightstand of my 3-year-old, and he was a little concerned why I was taking it to work. I said, I promise it'll be back by the end of the day, because we've been reading this a lot. So The Day the Crayons Quit, another great one. I love this one for read aloud because, again, the expression, and each page is a different crayon writing a letter to their owner. And so, changing up the voice, modeling the different expression, the different characters. And I love this too, because look at these beautiful illustrations.
Yeah.
So this has been a fun read aloud. I went through this and just pulled out vocabulary words that would be great to talk about in a read aloud. I pulled out, letter writing when you letter writing.
That's a great one.
Yeah, each one is in letter format. So that's another one that is not only so enjoyable to just read aloud, but has so many things that you can take and use in your teaching as well.
Yep.
So those are my two. Again, it was so hard to narrow it down, but it was fun. It was fun. So those are two of my faves.
Yeah. Well, and I used The Day the Crayons Quit in my middle school classroom. I can't remember the exact lesson I was using, but one, the kids loved it. Two, and I don't know if this is what I use it for, but you could use it for author's purpose because they're all going at their points slightly differently. But yeah, I use that in a middle school classroom.
Oh, yeah. I love that author's purpose. And even I was thinking about like problem and solution too, because all of these crayons most of them have a problem that they want fixed. So yeah, there's just so many different directions you could go with it.
Good stuff.
I feel like makes a good read aloud. Anna, what about you? What two favorites did you bring?
Well, I agree with you, Morgan. This was kind of a trip down memory lane. I was like, oh gosh, I want this one. I want that one. So one that I remember when I was in 5th grade, now I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I was in 5th grade. So you guys do the math. And I can still remember to this day, it was my 5th grade teacher. We all sat on the floor and she read to us every single afternoon. And I still remember that. And this remains one of my very favorite books. It is Where the Red Fern Grows.
Mhm.
And you may say, well, if it's so favorite, Anna, why did you borrow it from the library? The reason I borrowed it from the library is because I think I loaned it out to someone and I haven't gotten it back yet. But that's okay. That's okay.
Yep.
That's what we do with our books that are our favorites. But I've got to tell you guys a story. I rushed to the library a couple of days ago and said, "Do you have Where the Red Fern Grows?" And the librarian looked at me and said, "Oh, I love that book. My fourth grade teacher read it to all of us." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's exactly the reason I need this book." And so I just thought, oh, read alouds, students, children, they remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Adults, they remember being read to.
Yep.
They remember. Yeah. And the next one was when I was a first grade teacher, and it's called The Little Mouse, the Red Ripe Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear.
Cute.
The illustrations on this are just phenomenal. And I need to show you. Can you guys see? So this was one of my all-time favorites when I was a first grade teacher, and the students loved to listen to me read it because, of course, Morgan, like you had said, I read with a lot of expression, and it was definitely a page turner, if you will, even in first grade.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was wonderful. But Morgan, just like you said about picking one out, I went to my bookshelf and I thought, oh, I love this one. I love this one. The kids love that one. Yeah, it was hard. It was hard.
Yeah. I love it that you had that moment with the librarian.
Oh, I know.
I mean, like, that's the purpose of you talking about that book today. And then that's her first memory of that book.
Very first memory. And I mean, she just kind of melted and said, oh my gosh, and then she started talking about her fourth grade teacher. Yeah.
Love it. All right. Well, the two I brought, I had the same problem you guys did of what am I going to choose? And I'll be honest with you, what I'm going to show you were not my first thoughts, because the first couple that came to mind, I'm like, oh, those are good. But then when I walked to my bookshelf, I'm like, oh, but those are better. But there was nothing wrong with my first ones. But so I'm, in a 7th grade classroom, very easy to say we're too busy to do read alouds. And I would argue you're never too busy to do that. It may be the most important thing we do. So I've got two kind of different styles of books. I used picture books a lot in my middle school classroom. Good
for you, Marty. Good for you.
Well, maybe because I love picture books, but there's so much we can do with them because we can consume a whole story in a short time and then pick it apart for 17 different reasons, just like we impromptu did with When the Crayons Quit. Right. We came up with multiple lesson plans just like that with that one picture book. So this, for the record, I own many versions of this book I'm going to show you, but this is my favorite edition of it. Casey at the Bat is one of my very favorite poems of all time. And so, like I said, I have multiple copies of this book, but when I found this one, I'll never forget walking up to my husband in the bookstore saying, I know I have multiple copies of this book, but I have to have this exact one. He's like, whatever, lady, just buy your book. Because this poem, it's the same poem that's in every other copy, but it's told as a newspaper.
Oh, cool.
I love that.
These amazing old-timey pencil drawings that make it look like, this is the sports story of the day of Casey going up to bat. And so, of course, I don't know. I don't want to ruin the poem in case someone's not familiar with it, but the page turns in this book are at the exact right spots. And there's a Post-it note right here so that I would know when to slow down and make sure all my kiddos were listening because we were about to make a point.
And you know what, Marty, can I interrupt? I'm sorry, but I think that is so important. Put Post-its in those books. You know, write yourself a note. Show the students that these books and their importance, not only their importance, but also what you really want to emphasize. Because when you show them that you've done that, then they know, oh, this must be an important book, or this must be an important section, or whatever.
Exactly.
I think that's very beneficial to do that and show the students.
Yeah.
Right.
Your children.
That's teaching them that skill too.
Yes.
Of exploring the book and really taking note of things you want to point out or things you want to include. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and so this one didn't make the cut. This is one of my favorite picture books, by the way, but you can see it still has all my little Post-it notes from points I want to make on these various pages. But yeah, so Casey at the bat, number one. But then I told you I always read in my classes, and I didn't think I had any of the novels I shared in my reading classes as read alouds until I saw this one. This was the very first read aloud I ever did, and then it became a yearly read aloud. And Alan Gratz's Code of Honor. I love anything by Alan Gratz. Let me just preface it there. But this one is phenomenal. Students love it. Cannot get enough of it. And so it became the one I started every year with, because once we got going in the year, I would give them let them vote. I would give them a couple of options and then let them choose. So I would have different read alouds going in different classes because I realized I got tired of reading the same book 6 times a day. But this one, I never gave them a choice. I'm like, we're all going to read this one. But I noticed when I took it off my bookshelf last night, ladies, like the spine is breaking. You can't really see it, but I'm like, it's so well loved that, but that's okay. It's
okay, Marty, I'm going to put you on the spot. When did you first start reading that book? How many years ago do you think it was?
2012, maybe 13.
So at least 13 years ago, and you still remember that day.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think something to think about, and we're running out of time, but Morgan, you hit on this. Even for the little kids, you need to be intentional about the books you choose. You were talking about the words on the page. I was very intentional about the books I chose as read aloud possibilities because they needed to have short chapters. I could not read 20 minutes of my 47-minute period to my kids. Yeah. But I always found books with either short chapters, that's this one, or short sections that I could divide up. So I think you have to be intentional about what you're bringing to them. It's not just pick up any old book off the shelf.
Yeah. And I will say, I got to say one more thing that I feel like sums up all of our thoughts and conversations is that, Marty, I bet that your students that heard you read that book, when they are adults, when they are our age, they're going to have moments like we're having of like, oh, I remember reading that in this class. Like those are, I mean, that's the reason why we're here for World Read Aloud Day, because we want to instill that and create those core memories for our students.
Yes, we do.
Yes. So core memories that you enjoy and then you get to learn alongside. There's nothing better as a teacher. Nothing. Well, on that beautiful note, thank you, Morgan, for summing it up so well. We will wrap up our World Read Aloud Day show. We will see you later this month with our regular Lit Gals. We're talking about books. We're just talking about love. We're leaving that very broad. And so we're going to see how we all interpret this super broad topic here in February. But man, World Read Aloud Day, enjoy it. Find somebody to read to. And thanks for letting us be a part of your World Read Aloud Day. And we will see you later in February.
Thank you.
Thanks.